think the hardest question you could ask any car enthusiast or car nerd is, what's your favorite car? I mean, we're car nerds. We have so many cars that we love, and we go deep diving into the different marques that we love and what's our favorite. And it's probably the hardest question for me because I've got a list, and every car on that list speaks to a certain part of me that makes me an enthusiast. So if we were to back up, say, 15 years ago when I entered the business, it probably would not have been the Ferrari F50. And while I respected it and had an understanding of what it represented, its design to me, like a lot of people would agree with, was a little bit on the polarizing side. It was a vast departure from what we expected from Ferrari. It had some quirkiness, the removable top, but it's a race car derivative. So there was just a lot of things that would give you pause when you thought about this particular car. But like everything else, the experience forms your opinions.
Keep the fiery V12's revs about $5,000, and it jumps off corners like a scalded feline.
We have to go all the way back to, let's say, 2015. My first F50 that I purchased to resell was a Rosso Barchetta example with about 8,000 kilometers. And at that time, I started to really appreciate what these cars represented. So anytime I get involved in trying to acquire a certain brand or a marque or a model or to sell to my clients, I try to do my best to educate myself on a vehicle's history. And for the first time, I decided to do a little bit of a deep dive into the F50. And what I discovered was just how special these cars were. This design was part of a concept design in 1989 called the Mythos. It was a Pininfarina pen car, like a lot of the cars back there were. And the Mythos was kind of like this hybridized F40-ish, but it had the removable top, and you could see a lot of F50 in it. And I think the original reception was not that warm. And then if you enter into the mid-90s, when the F50 comes out, it's a car that was built really for true enthusiasts. The F40 has this almost universally beautiful design. It's kind of the icon of all of the halo cars. But the F50, if you have to draw a circle around it, is probably the race car, the halo cars.
A power plant of 4.7-liter dual overhead cam V12 with 5-valve cylinder heads is basically a detuned Formula One engine. It makes a stunning 513 horsepower and 347 pound-feet of torque.
Everything about its execution is to become more civilized than the F40, which it did, but also to give the customer as close to the race car experience for the street as they could.
It's all cloaked in rakish carbon fiber body panels that scream race car. But if all this leads you to expect an uncompromising race car character from the F50, then you may be disappointed. Ferrari has softened the edges of the envelope just enough to make the F50 a very drivable machine.
What we see here is a pretty large car, but it only weighs 2,800 pounds. You had a carbon fiber monocoque, you have magnesium wheels, you have kind of a bare bones interior with a lot of carbon fiber, some cool stuff with the dashboard, as you can see with the neon back lighting. It's one of those things where form didn't really marry function here. I think function kind of led to the form, and that's why you have this, like, I don't know, let's call it controversial design. But as I started to really dive into the car, you start to appreciate the beauty. Everything makes sense, everything has a function. There's no unnecessary scoops. Even the large wing, which is a little bit more impactful than the F40 had, has a true aerodynamic function. So you really started to appreciate the car. So it's the second rarest of all of the halo cars. There's only 349 of these, second only to the 288 GTO. It was the type of car that I think when it originally came out had a little bit of rejection in the market. But as you start to appreciate everything that this car is, you begin to understand why this is becoming probably one of the more sought after of the big five, let's call it. I think to date, we transacted 25 or 26 cars. And what I've noticed was, like, there's been this evolution of buyers. 10 years ago, it was someone wanting to add the car, maybe drive it. A lot of collectors were starting to realize, hey, that's a pretty cool car, we should get one. And what we're seeing now is a necessity of having one of these in your collection, simply because it represents a little departure from what Ferrari usually delivers. But now as the car begins to age, you really start to appreciate a little bit of the chances that were taken in executing this design. This particular example I love. It's a 5,000 kilometer example, but it was always collector owned. And if you look at everything, preservation had been kept in mind for this car really from day one. The paint is practically perfect. The interior is stunning. Everything about this car was so well looked after. And what's really cool about a lot of the Ferraris, especially as they began to look at more of these specialized models, is you would always get this kind of added value accessories with them. This car probably is at the top of the list for that. So when you bought this car, you would get a flight case, which would hold your tops and your roll bars here and your tonneau cover, as well as the soft top, which gets stored here behind the seats. But you would also get commemorative wine flutes. You would get driving shoes for the original owner that was sized up to the owner. And then you'd have all your books and tools and your accessories, and everything was very specific to the F50. And then like a lot of the cars, you would have your fitted luggage. These cars, as you start to kind of hunt for them, it's almost like this great treasure hunt of, well, how complete is the car? And the truth is, out of 25 cars, I think we've only transacted 2 cars that had the shoes, never had a set of wine flutes, so that's still kind of a box to check for me. But to see now some of these examples that we're looking at, the owners of these cars are starting to complete kind of the full experience of the car, which is not just the vehicle and not just like the tools and the books and everything, but some of the other accessories. What this car has is really cool. It's got the production book, which is called, some people call this a baby book, because this is the actual car on the production line, and it gives you all the different aspects of its production specific to the car. So I'll try to do this for the camera. But you see the monocoque on the production line. You see the engine in the various different stages, including there's some great machine shots. So this is something that goes along with every car. Not every car that we've transacted has come with. In fact, few of them have. But it really speaks to what Ferrari was trying to attain with the experience. I think one of the previous owners went out and found all of the original press releases for I think it's the Paris and the Frankfurt Auto Show, and then even went out and bought the original negatives for the press releases, and then all of the point of sale press kits for the full model range for Ferrari. So some of the previous owners, I think, are starting to hunt down some of the hard to find parts, but this car was incredibly complete. Doesn't have the shoes, doesn't have the wine flutes, but what it lacked there, it actually made up for in some very unique press and publications that you don't really see often with these cars. And of course, this is really the requirement for any of these cars, and it is Classic K certified. And I think most viewers that watch our stuff know what this represents, that it's a certification from Ferrari, that everything is true and correct and matching, and it's really just a must with these cars. So I think as time continues to go on, I believe these cars will probably start to lead in value, simply because of how different they are and how special they are in the lineage. And if you really look at values today, it's really been like a neck-and-neck race between this car and the 288 GTO. There's been a pretty substantial rise in pricing on both of the cars, and really good examples are now in the range of between $5 and $6 million for each of them. So to answer the question I presented in the beginning, this is one of my favorite cars. For a lot of reasons. I've grown to appreciate it for what it represents, and the more you stand next to it, the more you appreciate its beauty.